Welcome to the video, everybody. In this video, we're going to be going over how to create an asteroid-like game. So the player is going to be able to rotate, shoot a bullet. We'll be able to shoot these little asteroids that show up. We'll have enemy ships that spawn and shoot at us randomly. We have larger ones, asteroids here that we can shoot that will then turn into the smaller ones. We have the screen warping, so we can go through multiple screens. And we have our score and life system. So when the player gets hit by anything, it's going to die. We'll lose our lives and then we can restart. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into the game. The first thing that we need to do is we need to create the player's ship, and then the ship is going to have the ability to rotate and thrust. So the thrust is going to accelerate the ship forward in the direction that it's facing, and then obviously we'll be able to rotate the ship left and right. So back here in the editor, the first thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll create an empty, and we'll call this one the player. And now for the player, I'm just going to use some 2D sprites here. So I'll go with the squares. I think this will be the best, easiest way to do it here. I'm going to go ahead and scale this. So I'll scale it in till we get it nice here, and then maybe make it a little bit longer. And then we're also going to want to rotate this. So I'll rotate it over here, -15 or so, I believe. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. So Control D to duplicate it. And then this one, we're going to, instead of -15, we'll rotate this one at 15. So it'll be kind of even here. And then if we zoom in, I'm going to want to move these both. So I'm going to move this one a little bit over here and this one over here to make them line up for us here right in the middle. And then we'll go ahead and we'll duplicate one more of these. And then this one will rotate to a 90-degree angle. And then we're going to scale this one down. And we'll move it kind of down here. So then we'll kind of have a little rocket looking thing here. All right, and now back on the player here, we're going to need to add a couple of components. So we're going to need a rigid body eventually, and we're going to want to set this gravity scale to 0. And then we're also going to want to add a collider. So we'll add a box collider to this, box collider 2D. And then we'll go ahead and we'll edit the collider, and we'll kind of make this a little bit nicer, as close as we can get it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Make it kind of like that. And then now we're going to need to add our script. So to make the player move, so we'll come in here, we'll create a new folder. We'll call this one scripts. And inside here, we're going to create a new C# script, and we'll call this one player movement. Inside of our script here, we're going to need a couple of floats. So I'm going to make these serialized fields. First one is going to be for our main thrust. So we'll call that one main thrust. And I'm going to set that equal to 80. And we'll need one more serialized field here, another float, and this one's going to be for the rotate thrust. And I'm going to go ahead and set that one to 125. And then we're also going to need to get a reference to our rigid body. So we'll go ahead and we'll do rigid body 2D, and I'm simply going to call it RB. And then down here in start, we're going to say RB equals get component rigid body 2D. Now down here below update, we're going to create our own function here, and we're going to call this one movement. And so this is going to be for the player movement. So we're going to write out a couple of if statements here. So we'll do if, and what we're going to do is if the input dot get key, and then we'll enter in, we'll use the key code. So we'll do key code dot, and we're going to start off with space. So we're going to use the space for the main thruster movement of the player. And then we're also going to need one for the key code A. So we'll go ahead and do this and put A. And that's going to be for our movement to the left or rotating to the left. And then we're going to need to do the same thing, but this one is going to be for D. So if we are rotating the ship to the right. Now for the space, for the main thrust here, we're going to do RB. So we're going to be moving our rigid body. We're going to say add relative force. And then this is going to be a vector 3 dot up. And we're going to multiply that by our main thrust and then by time, delta time. And then to rotate to the left and to the right here, we're going to do something kind of similar, but we're going to do transform dot rotate. And this is going to be again a vector 3. And we're going to use dot forward. And then this one we're going to multiply by our rotate thrust and times dot delta time. And for D, we're going to do the same thing, except for what we're going to do is we're simply going to put in a negative here. So it's going to be negative vector 3. So it's going to do the opposite. And now we'll go ahead and in update here, we're going to need to call movement. So now if we save this back in the editor here, we're going to want to add the script to our player. And then now if we press play, we should be able to move our player. So space moves up, A moves left, rotating. So we're go ahead. Now we have player movement. The next step for us here is to add bullets and then make it so that the player ship is going to fire the bullets in the direction that it's facing, and then the bullets will disappear after a short while. So we'll need to go ahead and create the bullet. So we can right click and we're going to simply use another 2D object here. We'll use a circle this time for the bullet. We'll go ahead and we'll scale this down. To how big we think our bullet should be, maybe add some color to it. I don't know, something so it stands out. And then while we're at that as well, the background, the blue background, we're going to go ahead and change that here to probably black. And then we're going to rename this to bullet. And then in our assets folder, we're also going to want to go ahead, create a new folder, call this one prefabs. And then we're going to want to make a prefab out of this bullet. So we'll click and drag that down here. And now it is a prefab. Now we're going to go back to scripts here and we'll create a new script. And this one, we're going to call this one bullet. Now inside this script, we're going to need a couple of things. We're going to get another serialized field. This one is going to be a float, and this is going to be for our bullet speed. So we'll simply call it bullet speed. And I'm going to set mine to 10. And then in start here, to make the bullet destroy after a certain amount of time, we're going to go ahead and say destroy game object. And then we're going to do a comma and then the amount of time that we want it to destroy. So I'll do maybe 3 seconds. And then to make the bullet move, what we're going to do is we're going to do transform.position, and then we're going to do that, set that to plus equals, and we're going to say transform.up, and we're going to multiply that by time.delta time, and multiply that by the bullet speed. So that should move our bullet here up and away from the player, whichever direction it's facing. And back in the editor here, we're going to want to go into our bullet prefab here. We're going to want to add the bullet script that we created and want to make sure that's on the prefab. And that should now make the bullet move. So if we click play, the bullet should be moving, which is great. Now we're going to need to set it up so that the player actually fires the bullet. So what we'll do here is for the player, we're going to right click and we're going to go ahead and create an empty. And I'm going to call this one spawn point or bullet spawn point. And then we'll go ahead and we'll move this to where we want it to be. So towards the front of the player here. And now we're going to create a new script. And we'll call this one fire bullet. Now inside this script, we're going to need to get a reference to the bullet. So we're going to do another serialized field. And we're also going to need to get a reference to the spawn point. So we'll do the bullet here, and this is going to be a game object, and we'll call this bullet. And then we're going to do the same thing, and this is going to be a transform. And then this is going to be, we'll call this one the spawn point. And then we won't need start in here, so we'll go ahead and we'll delete that. And then underneath update, we're going to go ahead and create our own method here as well, and we'll call this one spawn bullet. And then here we're going to simply say if the player is clicking the mouse, so if input dot get mouse button down, and we're going to leave this at 0, that's going to be the left click. And then we're going to say instantiate, and we're going to instantiate the bullet. And then we need to instantiate it at the spawn point position and the spawn point's rotation. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now back in the editor, we're going to want to add the fire bullet to the player. And now we're going to need to select our bullet and our spawn point. So for our bullet, we're going to go into our prefabs and we're going to drag that in there. And then for our spawn point, we're going to drag that in there as well. And then while we're here, we might as well drag our player down into our prefabs folder to make that a prefab. And we can delete this other bullet that's in our scene. Now, if we click on play, we should be able to left click and we should be able to fire the bullet. However, that's not working. If we go back to our script, the issue is I didn't call our method that we created here. So we'll go ahead and we'll type in spawn bullet and we'll go ahead and call that method in update. Now back in our editor, if we click on play here, we are able to fire our bullets and it goes in front of the player in the direction that we are facing. The next goal for us here is to create 3 sizes of asteroids, and then these asteroids are going to break into smaller asteroids when they're shot, and then the smallest one will disappear when it's shot. And then the asteroids are going to drift around until they get shot or collide with the player. And if the player does collide with the asteroid, then the player is going to lose a life. So we'll go ahead and we'll break this up here. Okay, so before we start doing anything with the asteroids, I'm going to adjust the player real quick. I think it's too big. So I'm going to come into the player here. I'm going to make this a little bit skinnier, I think, on both sides. Like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab the whole player and scale the whole thing down a little bit. All right. There we go. I think that looks much better. And now for our asteroids, we're going to come in here. We're going to make a 2D object. Go into the sprites and we'll simply make a triangle. I think will be all right. And on this triangle, we're going to need a couple of things. So we're going to need a rigid body. So we'll add a rigid body 2D. And then we're also going to need a collider. So we're looking for the polygon collider here. And then on the rigid body, we're going to set the gravity scale down to 0. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this to the side here, and I will duplicate this twice. So then we're going to have 3 of them. Move these up here as well. Just so they're kind of next to each other so we can get a reference for how big we're making them. So we're going to want a big one, a medium-sized one, and then a small one. So the big one here, I think we'll go ahead and just make this a little bit bigger. This one maybe I'll make a little bit bigger, but this one maybe I'll make a little smaller, and then this one just a touch bigger here maybe. Something like that. So now that we got the three, we'll go ahead and we will rename these. So this is going to be the large asteroid, medium asteroid, and the small asteroid. Next up, we're going to need to make the asteroids move. So we'll go into our script folder, create a new script, and this one will be called asteroid movement. And now we'll need to attach this script to each one of the asteroids. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll hop in our script and we'll go ahead and set this up. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need a serialized field here. And this one's going to be for our speed. So this is going to be a float and we'll call it speed. And I'm going to set mine equal to 0.5f. And then we're also going to need a reference to our rigid bodies. So we're going to do rigid body RB. And we're not going to need updates. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And then in start, we're going to get that reference to our rigid body. So RB equals the get component rigid body. And this is going to be a 2D. Don't forget that. So, and then next we're going to set our movement. So we're going to say vector3 and we'll call this one movement. And this is going to equal a quaternion. And we're going to say dot angle axis. And so we want this to move we want these to move like between certain, at certain angles. So we're going to say a random range. So random dot range. And the range that we want, or that I've decided for myself here, is 40 and 140. You can use whichever one you would like. Those are the ones that I'll be using here. And then we're going to say vector3 dot forward. And then this is going to be multiplied by vector3 dot right. And then after that, or underneath that, we're going to have to set the velocity of the rigid body, so to this movement, and then we're going to multiply that by speed that we have. Now if we go back into the editor, if we click play here, these will start moving, and they're going to be moving at a random speed and random directions, angles. However, we do have some issues with them colliding and stuff, and we'll take care of that in a moment. So what we're going to want to do is we'll come in here into our colliders, and we're going to mark all of these as is trigger. So that'll make them triggers. So that's good. And then now we're going to need to make all of these also prefabs. So we'll select all of our asteroids, drag them into our prefab folder, and then we can go ahead and we can delete them from our scene for now. All right, now that we have our asteroids created, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up some spawners for them. So we will right click here, and I'm going to simply create an empty, and then we'll call this one the spawner. And then underneath this one, I'm going to create, now you can either create some empties or you can create some like 2D objects if you'd like, maybe to make it easier to recognize where these are set up. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that. And then we'll duplicate these, maybe make 4 of them. Rename these to spawner 1, spawner 2, 3 and 4. And then we'll go ahead and we'll move these, and I'm going to set mine up all down on the bottom here. You can do it differently, but to make it a little bit easier, I'm just going to have all of mine on the bottom. So maybe something like that. And then now we're going to go ahead and we'll create another script. And this one we're going to call spawn asteroids. And spawn asteroids we're going to want to put on the spawner. So in here, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get a couple of things. So we'll need the spawn points and the asteroids. I'm going to make both of these serialized fields. So the first one is going to be a transform, and these are going to be arrays. So we're going to need the little brackets here, and I'm going to call this one spawn points. And then we're going to do the same thing. This one's going to be game object. And again, we're going to want the little brackets for the arrays, and these are going to be called asteroids. And then we're going to need to set up a delay and the spawn interval, so how often we want them to spawn. So these are going to be floats, and we'll simply call the first one the asteroid spawn delay. And I'm going to set mine to 1F. And then we're also going to want to set up the spawn interval. So the asteroid spawn interval. And I'm going to set mine to 2F here. And then we're going to go ahead and get rid of update. We won't need that. And then we'll set up our method here for spawning the asteroid. So void, and we'll simply call this one spawn asteroid. And so in here, what we're going to do is we're going to set an int, and each one of these is going to be for we're going to do a random asteroid. And this is going to equal a random dot range. And the value of that range is going to be from anywhere from 0 and all the way up to the asteroids dot length. So depending upon how many asteroids we have, that number is going to change. And we're going to do the same thing here for our spawner. So, and we'll do random spawn point. And that's also going to equal a random dot range and 0, and then spawn points dot length. And then below that, we're going to instantiate the asteroids. So we're going to say instantiate. And what we're going to instantiate are the asteroids. And we're going to need our little brackets here, and we're going to do a random asteroid. And I spelled asteroid wrong. So we'll go ahead and we'll highlight this, and we'll do the Control R here to rename this. And we'll fix this so that it changes both of them. And here we're going to need a comma, and then this is where we're going to do our spawn points, and this is going to be at the random spawn point. So random spawn point, and we're going to do dot position, and then the rotation is going to be just our transform dot rotation. So now this should spawn a random asteroid at a random spawn point. So if we go back to the editor, the last thing we'll need to do is if we click here on the spawner, we're going to need to add our spawn points and our asteroids. So for our spawn points, I'm going to drag these over here. So we have spawner 1, spawner 2, 3, and 4. And then now for our asteroids, we're going to go to our prefabs, and we're going to grab each one of the asteroids. So the large, medium, and small. And so now it's going to cycle through these. So it should spawn at a random spawn point, and then it should spawn a random asteroid. So we'll go ahead and we'll click play to test that out. And nothing's happening. So what we want to do here is we don't want to simply call spawn asteroid, because that would not that would constantly spawn the asteroids, and it wouldn't take into effect these spawn intervals or delays. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say invoke repeating, and then inside of here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna say spawn asteroid. So that's the method that we did, and then we're gonna have our asteroid spawn delay, and then our asteroid spawn interval. So it's going to call spawn asteroid after 1 second here. That's our delay, and then it's going to call it every 2 seconds. So now back in the editor, this time if we click play, these should start spawning. And here we go. So now we'll see that we now have a bunch of asteroids spawning. All right, so the next thing that we need to do here is we need to make the large asteroid, when it gets hit, break up and spawn the medium asteroid, medium when it gets hit to spawn the small asteroid. And then when the small one gets hit, it should completely disappear. So what we'll do is we'll go in here, we'll create a new script for this, and we'll call this one Asteroid Collision. And now we're actually going to want to add that one to our bullet. So we'll come in here, we'll pull in that script into our player's bullet that they shoot, since it's going to be the one colliding with the asteroids. And then we'll open that script up. So in here, we can go ahead and remove start and update. We won't need either one of them. And then we're going to need a couple of serialized fields again. So this one's going to be a game object, and this is going to be the medium asteroid. And then we're also going to want another serialized field here for the small asteroid. And then what we're going to be doing is this is going to be an on trigger enter. So we're going to do void on trigger, on trigger enter 2D. And before we start this, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want a reference. So we're going to do a string, and this is, we can simply call this one asteroid. And this is going to equal our collision.gameObject.name, so the name of the object that we are colliding with. And so then now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say if the asteroid, so the thing we're colliding with, equals, and then we're going to set this up. The first one is large asteroid, and then this is the name of the asteroids that we created. And then since we're instantiating them, these come out with the name of clone afterwards. So we'll say large object, or large asteroid clone. So if that's the case, then we want to spawn in the medium one and then destroy the large one and the bullet. So we are going to say instantiate, and then we're going to instantiate the medium asteroid. And we want to instantiate that at the collision transform. So collision.transform.position. And then we also want that to have the same, so collision.transform rotation. And then what we'll do is we'll simply destroy, and we're going to destroy the object, so the collision.gameObject that we're colliding with. And then we're also going to destroy this .gameObject. So that way we'll destroy the bullet and the large asteroid, and then this is going to create a medium asteroid in its place. So we'll go ahead, we'll save that, test it out, make sure it's working, and then if it is, we'll add the other two, the medium and the small one. So now we'll wait for So we don't have, it's not actually colliding. And that's because here on our bullet, we never added a collider. So we're going to need to add a circle collider 2D and make that an is trigger. And so now we'll try this again. And we get a null reference exception. So if we double click that, that's taking us back here. So it's saying that the medium asteroid, doesn't exist. And that's because we need to come back and we never actually set the medium and the small asteroid over here. So we'll go ahead and drag them over here. And now we'll try this one last time here. And so you saw there that we shoot the large one and it broke down to the medium one. And same thing there. Perfect. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll simply copy this. And we'll do 2 more of these. And so we'll change this large one to medium. So if we're hitting a medium one, then what we want to do is instantiate the small asteroid. Oops. The small asteroid. And then if we're hitting the small asteroid, if we're hitting the small asteroid, then we don't actually want to instantiate anything. We simply want to destroy the asteroid and the bullet. So large, and we're instantiating medium. If we hit the medium, we're instantiating the small. If we hit the small, we are destroying everything. So back in the editor here, we'll go ahead and we'll click on play just to make sure that is all working. So we're shooting the small ones, it's working. Shooting the large, it's becoming medium. And mediums are becoming small. Perfect. All right, so we finished the asteroids here and we didn't do the life thing, but we're going to take care of that here down when we work on the menus in the UI. So now we'll move on to enabling screen wrapping. So when objects are going out of the screen in one direction, they're going to come back in. So if they leave the top, they'll come back in the bottom. If they leave the right, they'll come back in on the left. So to do that here, we're going to go in and we're going to make a new script and we'll call this one screen wrapping. And now this script, what we're going to have to do is we're going to want to attach it to anything that we want to actually, I guess, have the screen wrapping applied to it. So we will apply this to the player and to the asteroids. So we'll come in here, we're going to add that component. We'll add the script here, and then we're also going to add it to all of the asteroids. And if you want to, you can actually come in here and you can control click these and add the component and add it to all of them at the same time like that. I don't think we're going to put it on the bullets. I don't think I want it on the bullet. So now we'll go ahead and we'll jump into that script. All right, so for this, we're going to be using the rigid bodies. So what we'll do is we'll get a reference to the rigid bodies, rigid body 2D, and we're going to say RB like normal here. And then in start, we're going to say the rigid body equals the get component here. So in update, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to do a vector 3, and we're going to call this one screen position. And this is going to be equal to our camera dot main dot world to screen point. And we're going to put here, we're looking for the position. So the transform dot position. And now we're going to need to set a couple of floats. So we're going to want the world screen, and we're going to want the right, the left, the top, and the bottom here, so that way we can get the like the parameters of the world here. So we're going to go ahead and say float, and we'll call these world screen right to start with. And this one is going to be our camera dot main dot screen to world point. And this is going to be set. This is going to be a new vector2, and it's going to be our screen dot width and our screen dot height, and we want the x, so dot x. And then we're going to need to get the left, so that's going to be a float as well, and we'll call this one world screen left, and this one's going to be equal to our camera dot main dot screen to world point, and this one will do a new vector2, and here we're simply going to say 0, 0 dot x. And then we'll need to do the same or very similar thing to the for the top and bottom. So we're gonna need another float here, world screen, call this one top. It's gonna be equal to our camera dot main dot screen to world point. This one is gonna be again a new vector2. And here we're gonna do our screen dot width. Oops, screen dot width and our screen dot height. And this one's going to be the y instead of the x. Fix this. And then the same thing here for world screen bottom. This is going to equal our camera dot main screen to world point. And this one again will be a new vector2. And this is going to be 0, 0 again. And this one we want dot y. And then now we'll do an else if. This is going to be screen position dot x. Oops, dot x. And here we're going to go if it's greater than or equal to our screen dot width and our velocity again, so our rb dot velocity dot x is greater than 0. And if this is the case, then we're going to do a transform dot position, and this is again going to be a new vector2. And for this one, we're going to want world screen left and our transform dot position dot y. Then here we're going to do another else if statement. So else if, and then this one we're going to say if our screen position dot y, and this time it's going to be greater than or equal to our screen dot height and our rb dot velocity dot y is greater than 0. And if that's the case, we're going to do a transform dot position and set that equal to a new vector2. In this one here is going to be the transform dot position dot x, and then this one's going to be for the bottom, so it'll be world screen bottom. And then we have our one last one here, and this is again going to be an else if, and this one we're going to say screen position dot y, And this one, if it's going to be less than or equal to 0, and our rb.velocity.y is less than 0. Then here we'll want to again do a transform.position and set that equal to a new vector 2. And here we're going to do again transform.position.x and then world screen top for this one. Okay, so then to kind of go over this a little bit, what we're saying here is if our position, so the object that we are attaching or that we attach the script to, if their position on the screen, their x position on the screen is less than or equal to 0, so if it's on the left hand side and if it's outside of the bounds of the left hand side here, and we're continuing to move that way, we're continuing to move left, then we're going to set our new transform, so our new position, transform.position here, to our world screen right, which is going to be back over here on the right hand side of the screen, and we're keeping our y position for the transform. And then that's similar to what the rest of these do here. So this one again, this one is if our transform position dot x is greater than or equal to our screen width. So if we're on the right hand side and our velocity is greater than 0, so we're continuing to move to the right, then we're going to set it over here to world screen left, and we're going to keep our y position. And then the same with the last two, but these are just going up and down. But they have the same concept applies there. So up here we are getting the bounds of our game, and then down here we are checking those bounds, and then if we're outside of them, we are moving the object to a new position so it wraps through. And now this isn't going to be the most efficient way to do this. However, for a game like this, it'll work fine. So back here, if we play the game, our player should be able to go out of the top and come back to the bottom. And the same with the right and come back in through the left. And then that's going to apply for any of the objects that we have that script attached to. And we attached it to the asteroids here. So they'll start coming in from all different angles. You can see these here leaving and coming back in to the other side. All right, so the next step here is to add some menus and the UI. So back here in the game, we'll be using a canvas to do that. And then we're also going to use the same hearts, I think, that we've used in the last couple of videos to keep it simple. And I also think they look pretty good. So what we can do is we'll go ahead and we'll jump over to the asset store here, and we can open them in Unity. You can also come in to the package manager if you wanted to find them, if you already had them downloaded, for example, and then we'll go ahead and import them. I'm only going to select the one that I want here. I only want the red heart. So this one here, and we'll go ahead and import that. And for Text Mesh Pro, I've been having an issue lately with it for some reason, but what I found is if you come down here to Text Mesh Pro and grab the package resources and the essential one here on the left and import it, it should resolve the issues. Sometimes when you create the text items, it doesn't allow you to use the text because there are no fonts. So if you do that, if you run into that issue, this should resolve that for you. But then we'll go ahead and we'll get started here. So I'll right click and we will add in the UI, we're going to go ahead and add in a canvas. For my canvas, I like to set this down to the screen space camera here, and then drag the main camera into the camera that it's looking at, so it makes it the same size as the screen here. I find it easier to work with for myself. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add in a text for the Text Mesh Pro. We'll call this one the score text. And then for the default text here, I think we'll go with score. And then obviously we'll need to move this up here. And and probably resize it as well. It's too big for this game. And now this, we're going to want to anchor this as well to the top right. And then the next thing, we're going to want to set our 3 hearts up as well. We can go ahead and do that. So under the canvas, again, we will right click, and for this one, what we're going to looking for is the raw image. So we'll go ahead and we'll add one of these. And then for the raw image, what we'll actually do is we'll come in here into our prefab, and for the texture here, we can click this and drag that on there, and that's going to give us the heart. And then we'll go ahead and we'll scale this down to make it a little bit better. Move it, I think we'll put this one maybe over here in the top left is a good spot for it. So they're going to need to be a little smaller here for the hearts. But we'll go ahead and I think something like this will work. Maybe a little bit smaller as well. And you can make these look however you would like, obviously. I think I'll go like that is okay. And then we'll rename this. This one's going to be our heart 1. And we'll control D and control D to make 3 of them. And then after you rename this, this is going to be heart 2. And this one will be heart 3. So then we'll go ahead and we will move these, make them look a little bit nicer here. Perfect. And then the same with these 3 as well. We're going to want all of these to be anchored in the top right as well, so they don't move on us. If the player is playing a different size screen, for example, it'll still look okay. And we're also going to want a button for restarting the game when the player gets killed here. So underneath the canvas, we'll add another thing here. We're going to add a button. And this one we're going to rename to the restart button. And we'll change the text here for this to say restart. And our player is probably going to be right in the middle here. I think it's going to look a little bit better if we move this just up a little bit, maybe something like this. I think that'll be all right. And then by default, we're going to want this turned off. So we'll go ahead and uncheck that for now. All right, so I think we could start with the score first, maybe here. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and right click over here and create an empty, and we'll call this one score manager. And for the score manager here, we're going to need a new script. So we'll go down here, create a new script, and this one is going to simply be called score. And then we're going to need to attach this script to our score manager as well. We'll open that up. And now for the score, it's going to be pretty easy. In this script, at least, all we're going to be doing is really the script is going to be in charge of updating the score in the UI. So here we're going to have a serialized field. This will be TMP underscore text, and we'll call this one score TMP for Text Mesh Pro here. And then we're going to also want a public int, and this is going to be our player score. This way we can reference this from other scripts as well. This will be set to 0 by default. We are not going to need start in this script here, so we'll erase all of that stuff. Then in update, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set the score text. So what I'll do is below this here, we'll make our own function here, and this is we'll simply call it set score text, just for readability. And then here, this is going to be our score TMP, and we're going to simply say dot set text. And this text is going to equal score, and then however we want that to look, with a space there at the end, and then we're gonna say plus player score. And then don't forget to call this here in update. So here we'll call set score text, and we'll go ahead and save that. So now our score should always be there. So back in the editor here, what we'll need to do now is we'll need to get a reference for the score text. So we'll go drag this in here, and then if we click play, this should update from being blank to a 0, since that's what the player score is currently. So now we're going to jump back into our bullet script here, and this is where we're going to actually make the score move up. So at the top here, we're going to need to set our score, and we'll call it score. So this is going to get us the reference to over here to this class. And then what I like to do is I will simply do this. I will create an awake method here, and we're going to do score, and we'll set that equal to finding an object of type, and that's going to be of type score. And so now this other stuff here, the start and update, we don't really need to mess with that too much. Then what we'll want to be doing is we're going to be doing a on trigger enter 2D. And here we're going to get another string, or we're going to do another string for the collision object. So what we're colliding with, and that's going to be equal to the collision dot game object dot name. And now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say if we are colliding. So if the collision object, if that equals, and we have a couple of these. So the first one is going to be large asteroid, and since it's going to be the clone, it's going to be large asteroid with clone here in parentheses. And what we'll want to do is we'll want to say or if the collision object, if that equals the medium asteroid, and we'll want to do this for medium and small as well. So medium asteroid clone, and just double check and make sure you are not misspelling anything here. And then again, if the collision object, if that equals, for the last one here, small asteroid and clone. So if any of those three things are true, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to say, oops, score, and then our player score, and that's going to be equal to the score dot player score, and then plus how much ever we want to move the score up per asteroid that we destroy. So maybe we'll do 10. And you could obviously break these out, and if you wanted large to be worth more than medium and smaller, for example, you could do that in separate if statements here, but we're going to keep it simple. And now back in the game, if we click on play, and if we wait for some asteroids here, as we shoot them and destroy them, the score is going up. All right, so now we're going to want to start working on the player health and these hearts up here. So we'll right click and we'll go ahead and create a new script, and this one we can call player health. And then now for us, we're going to go ahead and we'll create another empty up here, and we'll call this one the health manager. And we're going to add the player health script to that and open that up. So in here, we're going to go ahead and we'll do a public int health. And then in start, we're going to go ahead and we'll set that. So our health is going to equal to 3, since we're going to have 3 hearts. And then now I'm going to go ahead and delete these comments here to get them out of the way. And we probably should, or we could open or create like a new script as well, but I'm gonna do the hearts in here as well. Like I said, if you wanted to, you can create a new script for this, but I'm just gonna put them in here because I think it's easy enough. So we're gonna do a serialized field, and this is gonna be a game object, and we'll call this one heart 1, and we're gonna want the same thing, heart 2 and heart 3. And then down here in update, I'm going to do I'm gonna do a switch and for the health, and then we're gonna set each case. So in this example, or for example, case number 3, so if our health is equal to 3, then what we're going to do is we're going to do heart1 dot set active, and this is actually going to be true because we have all 3 lives, so all of these are going to be true. So we're going to do heart1, heart2, and heart3, and all of those are going to be true. And then we're going to do a break, and then after that we're going to want to do case not 4, but we're going to want to do case 2. So if we only have 2 hearts, and in this case we have heart 1, that's actually going to be false. Heart 2 is actually going to be true because we'll still have heart 2, and heart 3 is going to be true as well. So we're going to remove heart 1, which is the one on the left, and then we'll need to do a break again here. And then we want one more case, so we're going to have case 1. So if we have 1 heart, then what we want is we want heart 1 to be set to false. And then the same with heart 2. This is also going to be false. And heart 3 is going to be true. And then we'll do our break again here. And then we're going to have one last one, and that's going to be case 0. And for case 0, didn't fix this. Oops. So for case 0, we're going to do the same thing. So we'll copy everything here. And the only thing we'll have to do is we'll have to change this heart 3 to false, since we're not going to have any lives, so everything should be false. So now we have a way to control the hearts, but now we'll need to actually start removing our health when the player dies. And before we get that set up here, we'll jump back into the editor, and over here we'll need to set each one of these hearts. So we can go ahead and heart 1, heart 2, and heart 3. And if we want to, we can test that this works. We can click on play, and you see 3. If we actually adjust this to 2, it'll remove 1. If we adjust it to 1, it'll remove 2. And then if we adjust it to 0, they're all gone. So now we need to make a way to actually make our health go down. So I'm going to create a new script, and this is going to be called player health, or player collision, I apologize. And this script we're going to want to go ahead and attach to our player prefab. And if you ever attach things to the prefabs and they're not and you're not actually in the prefab editing it, you can come over here, you can click this override and apply all, and that's going to apply all of the changes you made to the actual prefab. So now back in the script here, in the player collision script, we'll go ahead and get started. Here we're going to want a reference to our player health. So we'll go ahead and do player health, and we'll simply call this one player health. And then now we're going to grab a couple serialized fields. The first one is going to be a game object, and this is going to be the player itself. And then the second one is going to be a vector 3, and we'll call this one spawn position. So this is going to be for when the player dies. We're going to have the spawn position and spawn direction, or spawn rotation, I guess would make more sense. But so when the player spawns, when they respawn, we'll remove the comments here, and then in start, what we'll do is we're going to want to do player health. Oops. And I'm going to use find object of type, and then player health here. And then we'll go ahead, and we don't actually need update. And in here, we're going to do another void, and this one's going to be on trigger enter 2D as well. And for this one, we're going to do something similar to what we did over here in bullet. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this and paste that in here. So we want, again, we're going to want to get a name, the object's name that we're colliding with. And if the object is the large asteroid, the medium asteroid, or the small asteroid, then what we'll want to do is a little bit different here, but we're simply going to want to go to the player health dot health, and that's going to be, we're going to say that's minus equals 1. So that's going to set the player health. We're going to take away 1 from whatever the current player health dot health is. And then next we would want to, once the player gets hit, we're going to want to obviously destroy the player. So we'll do destroy, and what we're going to destroy is the collision dot game object. So the object that we are colliding with. And then we're also going to want to destroy this dot game object as well. And then we'll also need a way to respawn the player. So underneath the on trigger enter here, we will create another method, and this is going to be called spawn player. And what we're going to want to do here is we're simply going to instantiate the player, and we're going to do that at the spawn position and with the spawn rotation. And I messed up here. This shouldn't have been a vector 3. This should have been a quaternion. So that'll take care of that error. And then you want to be careful where you call spawn player. You want to make sure that you do it before you're destroying these objects, or before you're destroying the player object, since it's going to have the reference to the player. Otherwise, you will run into an error here. So we'll go ahead and we'll call that before we destroy the objects. So now back in the editor here, we'll have to add a couple things. So for our player, we'll go into the prefabs. We're going to add our player here. The position 000 is fine. I think spawning right back here is good. And then the rotation as well. This should be fine. We shouldn't have to adjust this. However, if we wanted to change the positions of where we're spawning, for example, we can go ahead and we could change these numbers as well. But if we click on play, now if we get hit, we should go ahead and lose a life and spawn back here in the middle. And so we're getting this here, this null reference exception. It's saying that the player doesn't exist. That's because if you look here on the script, there is nothing assigned here. That's because when we made these changes, I didn't do it inside of the player prefab. So if we come over here, you'll see these changes were not applied to the prefab. So when it spawned the new prefab, it didn't have these changes. So if we go ahead and apply all here, click on play and test that out one more time. This time when we die, the first one will work. That's great. Now we've created the new one, and this new player has it on here. So if we go here, do the same thing to 2, and then the last one, no lives. And then now we'll need to add in like the restart button here so we don't continuously just keep going. All right, so next we're going to want to have that restart button display when we hit 0 lives, and that way and have the game pause, so that way we have to press restart, so that way we can kind of start over here. So to do that, I'm going to right click over here. I'll create another empty. I'm going to call this one UI manager. I will create a new script. And this one I think we'll call, I don't know, menu display. And we're going to add this script to the UI manager here. And open that up. All right, so for this to work how we want here, we're going to get a reference to the player health. So player health, we'll call this one player health. And we're gonna also want a serialized field. And this is gonna be of type button. And we'll call this one restart button. I'm gonna go ahead and remove start and the comments here. And then I'm gonna do an awake method. And in here, I'm gonna do player health. And I'm going to set that one equal to, again, the find object of type and of type player health. And then underneath update here, we're going to create our own method again. And this one's going to be a public method. So public void, and I'm going to call this one restart game. And then in here, what we're going to do is we're going to want to do scene manager and dot load scene. And for us, we'll simply load scene 0 since we only have the one scene. And then when we do that, we're gonna say, so when we do restart the game, we're gonna want to turn the restart button off. So we're gonna say restart button dot game object set active to false. And then we're gonna need to reset the player health. So player health dot health, and that's going to equal 3 again. And then we're also going to need to resume the game when we click this button. So we'll say time dot time scale. Oops. And that's going to equal 1. And so we'll attach this to the button in the inspector there. And then in update, we're going to want to say if our player health dot health is equal to 0. So if we run out of lives, then we're going to want to pause the game. So this is where we'll do that time dot time scale. And this is going to equal 0. And then at this point, once we run out of the lives, then we will set that restart button dot game object set active to true. So we'll set it to true, and then we'll have the ability to push the button. And then when we push it, this is what we will do. So back over here in the editor, if we go back to the UI manager, we'll click and drag that restart button here. And then we'll need to actually click on the restart button as well. And then down here underneath the button component here, this is where we can choose what we want to do. So if we click this, we'll add the UI manager over here since that's what has our script on it. And then our function is going to be under menu display. That's our script. And then the one that we created here is restart game. So if we unclick, we're going to call this function. So now if we click play to test this out here, once we run out of lives, if we go die, so 2, 1, and one more here, 0. Perfect. So now we have the restart button is popping up and the game is paused, so nothing else is happening. And now if we click on restart, it's going to restart everything for us here. Next up is the sound effects and particle effects. I'm going to go ahead and skip this one again. I'm not trying to make these games super polished or anything right now. I'm just trying to complete all these goals and kind of learn some things. I'll add these in maybe in some of the later games. We'll go over some of that stuff. So the next goal here is one of the stretch goals, and this is to add a flying saucer that's going to enter the screen and shoot at the player from time to time. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll need to make the enemy ship now, and we can do that by doing a 2D object here, and we can do a capsule. And then if we go ahead and if we scale this down a little bit, we can kind of make it look sort of like a flying saucer, I guess. We'll go ahead and maybe adjust the color. Let's go ahead and move it over to the side a little bit. Maybe we'll make it a little bit bigger. I'm not sure, something like that maybe. So then we can go ahead and adjust the color to something else. I'm not sure exactly what we want. Maybe we'll have a green ship flying through. Our bullets are green, I guess. So maybe a nice yellow ship. So we'll go ahead, we'll make that ship, and we will rename this to enemy ship. And then I'm going to make a prefab out of this as well, and I'll delete it from the scene. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to spawn the enemy ship. So we'll go back into our scripts here, and we'll go back into our spawn asteroid script that we have here. Maybe we should have named this something a little bit different, but we'll stick with this for now. And then in here, all we'll have to do is we'll make a serialized field, and this is going to be a game object, and we'll call this one enemy ship. And now we're also going to want a delay for this because we don't want it to spawn right away. So we'll go ahead and we'll do another float, and this one we can call ship spawn delay, and maybe we'll set that one to 10 seconds, so it'll spawn after 10 seconds. And then we'll do another float and call it ship spawn interval, and we can set this one to 10 seconds as well maybe. So then we can set it so it spawns every so often. And then we're going to want something similar to what we did here. So we'll go ahead and we'll create another one, and this will be called spawn enemy ship. And in here, we're going to do int random spawn point. And this is going to equal our random.range. And here we're going to do again 0, and this will be the spawn points dot length. So we'll go ahead and select one of the spawn points there. And then we're going to instantiate, and here we're going to instantiate our enemy ship. And we want to do so at the spawn points, and then we'll do the random spawn point again, dot position, and then the transform dot rotation. And then just like before, when we did with the spawn asteroids here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to call the invoke repeating, and then we're going to do spawn enemy ship. And this one, instead of the asteroid, we're going to have the ship spawn delay, comma, ship spawn interval. So now this should spawn our ship after 10 seconds and continue spawning them every 10 seconds after that. So we'll jump back here in the editor and give that a try. So we'll press play. So now we'll have to wait for 10 seconds here to make sure it actually spawns. And we get an error message. Again, null. null reference exception. So we know what is causing that. If we go back to the spawner, now we need to add our enemy ship here. So back here to our prefabs, we'll select our enemy ship and drag that in there. And now we'll try it one more time. And it is spawning it. It's just off screen here, you can see, because we don't have any movement for it yet. So we'll go ahead and set that up now. And for the movement, what we can do is we can actually reuse the asteroid movement script that we have. That way that's going to have it move in the same manner, which is going to work well for us. And then also back here in the spawn asteroids, I think I'm going to adjust this ship spawn delay that to 5 seconds maybe. That way it spawns right away after 5 seconds, and then it'll spawn every 10 seconds afterwards. So now we'll jump back here in the editor, and we'll go ahead and play that and test it out and make sure that it spawns after 5 seconds here, and then make sure it's also moving. And so there's no rigid body attached to the enemy ship, so we're not able to move. So we'll have to come in here and we'll need to add that rigid body 2D, because that's how we set the movement up. And then don't forget to set that gravity scale down to 0. And then we can also make sure, make sure you add it to the actual prefab itself. So we'll go ahead and press play here and try that one more time. All right, and we can see here that the ships are spawning, which is great. Next up, we're going to need a bullet that our enemy ship can fire. We're not going to want to use the same bullet because we want it to move at a different time and in a different way. So we'll go ahead and we'll right click here and just create a new circle and scale this one down as well. Something like that maybe. And then we will rename this to enemy bullet. And we'll go ahead and we'll probably change this color as well, make it stand out a little bit more. Maybe red. Red's a good color for an enemy bullet. And then we'll drag it down here, make that a prefab. We'll need a couple things on here. We're going to need a rigid body. So we'll go ahead and do that and set that gravity scale to 0 again. And we're also going to need a collider. So we're going to use a circle collider on this, and we're going to make that a trigger. All right, and then we're going to create a new script here, and this one is going to be called enemy bullet. All right, so in this script here, we'll need to do a couple of things. We'll go ahead and remove this comment, and then we'll get a serialized field, and this is going to be a float, and we'll call it force. And then we're going to need a game object. This one's going to be the player, and then we're going to need the rigid body as well. So the rigid body 2D, and we'll simply call that one RB like usual. And we're not going to need update, so we can get rid of that as well. And in here, we're going to be setting up the enemy bullet's movement. So we're going to have it shoot towards the player. So in start, we're going to go ahead and get the reference to that rigid body. So RB is going to equal the get component, rigid body 2D, and then we're going to set our player. So the player is going to equal get component as well, but I'm going to use .find find object with tag. So not get component, it's going to be game object with a capital G, and .find object find object with tag here. And then we're going to want this to be the player tag. And so we can save that. And then we'll want to make sure that our player actually has the player tag on it. So up here it says untagged. So we'll go ahead and select player, which should be pre-made by Unity for us. All right, and now we'll hop back in the script here and finish the script. So here we're going to set our direction. So this is going to be a vector 3. We'll call it direction. And this is going to equal the player dot transform dot position minus our transform dot position. And then here we're going to set the velocity of our rigid body that's going to be attached to the bullet. So rb dot velocity. And this is going to equal a new, and this will be a vector 2. And then this will be the direction x, comma direction y. And we're going to do dot normalized and multiply that by our force that we have. And then we're also going to want to destroy the bullets after a little bit so they don't just keep going everywhere. So we'll do destroy and then game object and maybe 5 for 5 seconds here. So now this should set the direction towards our player's transform, so towards the player, at our times our force. And we can set that force in the editor. So if we come back into our enemy bullet here, we can add our component, and this is going to be the enemy bullet script. And here we have the force. I'm going to go with a 2.5. I think that's going to work good from what I've tested. So I'll use that, but feel free to use whatever you like. So if we click on play now, this should start moving the ball, which is perfect. So it moved it that way because that was the direction of the player. All right, and now we're gonna need to spawn the enemy bullet in. So what we'll do is we'll delete that one from the scene, and now in our enemy ship itself, we'll double click on that. So we're working on the enemy ship. On the prefab, we'll come in here, we'll right click, create an empty, and then this is gonna be the spawn point. So where we want the bullet to spawn from, we can go ahead and move this wherever we want. I think I'm going to have it come from the bottom of the ship maybe. So then we can go ahead and back out of that. And then now we're going to want to do another script. So we'll create a new script here, and this we can call fire enemy bullet. So we'll go ahead, we will open that up. And then what we'll do is we're going to get another couple serialized fields here. This first one's going to be a game object, and this will be the enemy bullet. And then we're going to do another one, and this is going to be the transform, or a type transform. And this is going to be that spawn point that we just created. So that'll let us know where we're going to be spawning the bullet. Here, and then we won't need start. And what we'll want to do is we'll want to do another float, and this we can call timer. So we can set up how often the enemy is going to shoot the bullet. Underneath update here, we'll go ahead and we'll create our own method again. This is going to be, we can call this one shoot. And here we're going to instantiate the enemy bullet, and we're going to do that at the spawn point dot transform, or spawn point dot position, and the spawn point dot rotation. And then in update, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set the timer to plus equals time dot delta time. Oops. And then we're going to do an if statement here, and we're going to say if the timer is greater than 2, so every 2 seconds, then we're going to set the timer back to 0, and we're going to call shoot. So that this should do every 2 seconds. we should fire a bullet. So back on our prefab here, we'll need to add that component. So fire enemy bullet, and then we'll need to set these up. So our enemy bullet will drag that prefab in here, and then our spawn point. So to get that, you can do this a couple different ways. You can drag the enemy ship on here, and then just drag the spawn point in like that. Is probably one of the easier ways, and then just simply delete it from the scene there. And then we'll go ahead and we'll click on play and test this out. So now we'll have to wait that 5 seconds for the enemy to spawn. Then it spawns. This is saying that the spawn point has not been set. So we'll double click into this and we'll drag this spawn point over here and back out of that. And we'll try this again here. We might not be able to do it the first way that I tried. So now it's spawned, and then we have the bullets shooting, and they're shooting in the general direction of the player there. You can see the one issue is they're not going to do anything if we collide with the bullets. So that's what we'll have to fix next. All right, so now we need to fix a couple of things here. So we'll need to have the enemy bullet when it's fired, when it collides with the player, we'll need to have that destroy the player and take away our life. And the same with the enemy ship. And then also our player, when our bullet shoots and collides with the enemy ship, it needs to destroy the enemy ship as well and give us points. So we'll go ahead and we'll take care of all of those things here. So we'll start with the first script here. We'll go ahead and go into Asteroid Collision, and this one's going to be pretty easy. So this is the one that we have on our player's bullet. So all we have to do here is actually say down here in on trigger enter, we can simply add another if statement. And this one we can say if the asteroid equals, this is going to be our enemy ship clone. So maybe instead of asteroid, we should have named this something like enemy or something along those lines. So we'll come up here, we'll do Control R, we'll rename this to enemy. So if our enemy equals the enemy ship clone, then what we'll do is we're going to do the exact same thing as this small asteroid. So we'll go ahead and copy that and paste that in here. So now we're going to destroy the ship. And then the next thing that we're going to want to do is over here in the bullet script as well, we'll want to add another thing for keeping score, like we have here. So if we destroy the enemy ship, so here we can do, you could put it under here if you wanted to have the same score. You could just add another or whatever. But I think we'll come down here and we'll say, you know, if the collision object equals, and again, this is going to be simply our enemy ship clone. Then what we'll do is we're going to do the same thing as above, but we'll do score dot player score, and we're going to equal our score dot player score, and we'll do maybe, I don't know, maybe 50 for the ship. And now here, the next thing that we'll want to do is under the player collision. So here, this is where we have it set. So if we're colliding with one of these objects, then the player is going to, you know, lose their life and we'll respawn the player. We're going to want to do the same thing here as we already have, but we're going to want to add the two new items. So if the collision object, and if that equals this one, we'll do the enemy ship clone, or if the collision object equals our enemy bullet, then we're going to want to remove the player's health and respawn the player and destroy both of those objects. So now we'll want to just make sure that we have everything attached here. And one other thing that we want to add for the enemy ship at least is we're going to want to add that the screen wrapping script that we wrote. So that way this one also does the screen wrapping. And that should be all that we have to do in the editor here. So if we click play, we'll just go ahead and make sure all of that is working. So we can still fire, we can still destroy our enemy ships. We're still moving, we're still being shot at. And if we get hit by one of the bullets, it does respawn us. If we shoot, it's not destroying the enemy ship, and it also didn't count as a collision. So what we'll do is, that's because there is no collider here. So what we can do is we can add the collider. So oops, I think we'll go with maybe a box collider 2D on this. And then if we double click in here, we can check out how that looks. So you can see it looks okay. I think that'll be good. So we'll go back and we'll try this. We'll try this one more time here just to make sure everything is actually working. So now the player is the ship is spawning. It is destroying us. However, it's still not happening because I did not make it a trigger. So one last testing time here just to make sure we again cover it all. All right, so I was a little confused about why it wasn't working. However, I realized here I had a typo, so I don't have an uppercase S. But if we go back here and we look how I typed this in all of these, I have enemy ship like this. This is one of the bad things about using strings. It can cause these kind of issues. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rename this and fix our mistake with giving that an uppercase S. And now we'll go ahead and test this out one last time here. And we'll wait for the ship. And now we can destroy the ship. So everything seems to be working as expected. Ships are still spawning, all that good stuff. We can die from the ship, we can kill the ship. Everything is working as expected. All right, so the last thing here is to add a hyperspace warp. So that's going to move the player to a random part of the screen. This is going to be for like a last ditch attempt to dodge any asteroids or anything like that. But it might also put the player in a worse predicament. So we'll go ahead and we'll work on that now. So this one is actually quite easy. All we'll have to do is come into our player movement script here that we have. And what we can do is we can set up a bool, and we're going to call this one can warp, for example. And by default, we're going to set this to true. And then we'll need to do a couple of different things here. So we're going to need to set up like the bounds of the screen, so the minimum and maximum bounds of the screen. So down here we'll create a method for that, and we'll call this one private void and maybe set min max. And in here we're going to do a vector2, and we'll call this one our bounds, and this is going to equal our camera.main, and this was going to be the dot screen to world point, and this will be a new vector2, our screen dot width, and our screen dot height. And then down here, what we'll do is we'll do like min x, and this is going to equal our negative bounds dot x, and our max x, which will equal our bounds dot x. And then we'll do min y, which is going to equal our, again, the negative bounds dot y, and then our max y. And this is going to equal our bounds dot y. And these are all red here because we never set them up here. So what we can do is we'll go ahead and make a float, and you can go ahead and do something like this as well. And you can do min x and comma, max x, min y, max y, and that'll set them all up on the same line here just to make it a little bit easier to read. And then we're also going to need to change the can warp, whether we can or cannot warp. So what we'll do is we'll create a new one, new method down here, and say call that one change can warp. And all this is going to do is it's going to set can warp, and this is going to set it equal to true. So in here, in movement here, we're going to go ahead and move that to fix that, but then we will add one more if statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to say if we can warp, so if can warp is equal to true, and our input dot get mouse button down is equal to 1, which will be our right click. You can set this to whichever button you would like it to be. Then what we want to do is we want to set a new transform, so a new position. So we're going to do transform dot position, and this is going to equal a new vector2. In here, we're going to want to set this to go to a random location. So this is going to be a random dot range, and that range is going to be the min and max that we just set up. So we'll start with the min x and comma max x, and then also we're going to want to do the same thing for the y. So random dot range min y and max y. And then when we click the mouse button, we're going to want to change the can warp and set that equal to false. That way you can't just spam it. It's going to, turn to false. And then we'll set a timer here. So what we can do is we can do an invoke. And then here we can call our change can warp. And we can do comma and then however long we want. So maybe every 5 seconds the player can use this. So now we should be able to press the get mouse button down as long as can warp is set to true. This is going to set our position to a new random position. And then it's going to set can warp to false. And then after 5 seconds, we are going to change the can warp back to true so we can press it again. So now back in the game here, if we go ahead and test this out, everything's working, we're shooting, we can pretend like we're in a lot of danger. Maybe we're about to crash into an asteroid or get hit by a bullet, and we can right click and it puts us in a random spot. And now we have to wait 5 seconds, and then we can right click again and it puts us in another random spot. So it might be a benefit, it might be something that's bad. It just all depends on our luck. So everything seems to be working good, and I believe that is the end of this game. Thanks for following me through this process here, and thank you for watching the video.